Now, it is my job to get people like you through your CeMAP qualification, but I wanted to do this video a little bit different. And that's because the biggest blocker that I face with students over and over and over again every single day is that either they just don't have the time or they just don't have the motivation. So I wanted to talk really honestly about actually how difficult it is to get CeMAP and why it's so difficult. And a lot of this goes back to when I was going through my CeMAP journey. So the short version of a very long story is that when I got pregnant, I knew that being in an employed role as a single parent was not going to facilitate that life that I needed, because I needed to at least be able to take school holidays off, and no employed job that I'm aware of can account for that. So I decided that mortgage advice was the career that I wanted to go down. I was really fortunate that I was already employed for a really great mortgage brokerage, and they'd said that they would support me in getting CeMAP qualified. I just had to do the work. So I started studying whilst I was pregnant, and I was just using the textbook because I didn't have the money to put into things like courses, and found it really hard, but I stuck with it diligently. And I kind of didn't know how to study back then, which made it even harder. I just thought that reading the textbook would be enough. And then I tried reading the textbook and copying the entire textbook into my own written book, pretty much word for word, to try and help it sink in. That didn't help too much either. And eventually, after about 4 or 5 months of studying every night diligently, because I was motivated and pregnant for CeMAP 1, I sat the exam and I failed. I didn't fail spectacularly, but I didn't pass either unit. And that was really frustrating because I'd put the work in. It's not like I'd half-arsed it. I had sat down every night for 1 to 2 hours and I'd done the work, but that type of learning just didn't work for me. And that's when I started to have a look at things like online courses or e-learning courses. And I found one provider in particular, who I'm not going to mention in here, but they offered a course, 6 months access, seemed really great, downloaded it, and it just felt quite dated. So a lot of the material in there wasn't relevant to the newer exams, and sat my exam again. At this point, I think I was 7 months pregnant and still failed. And at that point, felt pretty deflated and emotional because, again, I was pregnant and not really entirely sure what to do. In that instance, time and motivation for me weren't the biggest problem. Actually, the biggest problem was my learning style. I just wasn't doing something that worked best for me because I'm quite severely dyslexic. So went away, had my daughter, and came back to it whilst I was on maternity leave. Now, at this point, I was pretty desperate to pass. And that's when I booked a 5-day fast track course with a very popular provider, and I still failed. And a lot of people used to say to me, Charlotte, why do you feel like you're qualified to teach this stuff when you couldn't pass the exam on the first go? And it's a great question, but my answer would be, I didn't build the course for other people. So after I failed that fast track course, I rebuilt a whole course for myself. And that's when I started with the podcast episodes and started posting about my journey on social media. And that's how this business started. It wasn't to build a product to sell. It was build a product to give me the life and the career that I wanted. And I built the course and I kind of sat my own course and then I passed. And by that point, I had so much interest that that's kind of where Future in Finance came from. So if you are dyslexic or dyspraxic, or you've ever struggled with exams, sometimes it's not your motivation and it's not time. It's actually how you're studying that can be the biggest impact. But that is a small minority of people in comparison to the amount of people that are trying to get CeMAP qualified and they struggle because they are juggling sometimes one job, sometimes 2 jobs. They are juggling families. They might have multiple children. They might have relatives that they're looking after. They might also have a side hustle and hobbies alongside actually having to pay their bills. Time is the biggest factor. And there are ways that you can mitigate that. Usually my response is to shorten it with something like an e-learning platform that you can listen to on the go. And if you've never heard of that before and you want access to it for free, I will link it in the show notes. But the other one is motivation. And these types of people tend to fall into 2 different categories. If you have the time and you're not motivated, join a group. I have a completely free WhatsApp group that you can join, which has hundreds of other students who are also studying for CeMAP. They also sometimes have group get-togethers online where they kind of study together. I'm going to try and start facilitating some more of these as time goes on as well. But if motivation is your problem, join a group. If time is your problem, look at a different way to study that isn't going to stop you in your tracks. So a lot of people just don't have the time to sit and read. I am definitely one of those people. But if you have a long commute to work, if you like to walk the dog, if you listen to podcasts or music when you go to the gym, why not consider something like audio files? They come included in the e-learning platform and can save you a massive amount of time. Any provider that you use, and I would recommend that you get a trial with any provider that you decide to spend money with, they should have a way of learning that works for how you need to learn. So if you turn around to me and you say, actually, Charlotte, I need to be done with this in 5 days. I can only give you 5 days, but I can give you 5 full days. Great. Use the e-learning platform, do it in 5 days. It's possible. A lot of students treat the e-learning course like a fast track course, do the material in 5 days, sit their exam at the weekend and pass. If motivation is your biggest risk, look at some sort of guided coaching. So with my business, I run 6-week courses. And the basic principle is I will give you homework every week. And then for 2 hours a week, I will jump on a meeting with you and I will drag you through your CeMAP exams, kicking and screaming. So if you need somebody that is going to handhold you through the whole process, that is what I'm here for. You book on it for 6 weeks for CeMAP 1. You do another 6 weeks for CeMAP 2 and 3. I don't currently have any spaces available on 2 and 3 until January 2026. But I am 4 weeks into my current 6-week course, and 5 out of my 10 students have already passed because they've been motivated enough by the regular check-ins and by the updates from the other students to get it done. So there are always ways that you can combat it. It doesn't necessarily mean spending money. Please make sure you go and check out all of my free content. But if it is that you have a busy life already and you are just not sure how to work CeMAP into that bigger picture, my biggest piece of advice is to remember why you're doing it. If you hate your job and you never want to go back and you want to be able to hand your notice in and say, don't ever ring me again, remember that before you decide to go out for a drink instead of opening up your textbook. If you want to do it because you want to be able to take the next lot of summer holidays off, 7 whole weeks off work, and you think that a career in mortgage advice as a self-employed mortgage advisor is going to give you that, remember that before you make any plans and physically put your CeMAP studies into your diary. I don't just mean put it in on a Monday. I mean put it in on Monday and give yourself a specific time and set an alarm 5 minutes before to remind you that that's what you're meant to be doing in that time frame. It is just about staying consistent. It's exactly the same as going to the gym. A lot of people can't stay accountable until they get a personal trainer, right? They need somebody to keep them motivated or at least to remind them to go. Some people need to pay for really expensive gym memberships so that they actually go to the gym. If you feel like you're one of those people, buy a course, whether it's an e-learning course, whether it's a 6-week course. If you invest in something, you immediately have more skin in the game and you are going to be ready to go. I hope this video has been helpful. I'm going to try and do more FAQs on these YouTube videos. So if you do have any questions that you'd like me to answer in these videos, please leave them in the comments. Please give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel and I will catch you for the next one.